Have you ever noticed that the things most likely to ruin your life aren't usually illegal? They're the things everyone else is doing. When we're in our 20s, we have so much potential. This is the decade where you'll build your careers, your relationships, your habits, and the life you'll probably be living for years to come. You can do a lot of amazing things during this stage of your life, but you can also do one thing that's just as powerful. You can completely derail your life before it even begins, and the scary part is it usually doesn't happen overnight. It's not one massive mistake that ruins everything. It's a series of small decisions that feel normal because everyone around you is making them too. So today, I want to talk about the 5 completely legal drugs that have the potential to slowly ruin your life if you let them take control. Now, I'm not saying every person who uses these is guaranteed to have their life fall apart. That's obviously not true. But if you continually indulge in these, depend on them, or build your lifestyle around them, they can absolutely pull you off of what could have been a great path of your life. So let's get into it. The first one is probably the most stereotypical quote-unquote legal drug of this list, so don't worry, we'll get to more intense stuff later on, but it's Instagram and TikTok. I think this is one of the most important because it's something that almost everyone has access to, and honestly, someone has all struggled with at some point, probably. Now, I know some people might hear that and immediately think, really? Social media? You're calling that a drug? But I think if we're being honest with ourselves, the way a lot of us use those platforms is pretty similar to an addiction. The fact that people can spend 8 to 10 to even 12 hours a day just endlessly scrolling through videos is honestly kind of crazy when you think about it. You sit there swiping, video after video, and then suddenly hours have passed, and the worst part is you usually don't even remember what you watched 5 minutes ago. You didn't learn a new skill, you didn't improve your life, you didn't build anything, you just consumed. And look, I'm not saying social media is completely evil. There are definitely benefits, things to learn, you can connect with people, you can build a business on it, but I think the problem is that most people aren't using it in that way. Most people are letting it use them. And I honestly think this is something I've personally struggled with too. I've had to delete TikTok off my phone. I've had to completely deactivate my Instagram account because I found myself re-downloading it and not being able to stop. Again, I just had to admit to myself eventually this just isn't good for me. Not only because of the time it was taking away from me, but because of the type of content that it kept pushing me on these platforms. A lot of it wasn't encouraging at all. It just encouraged instant gratification, unhealthy habits, and honestly, sometimes content that just doesn't align with the person I wanted to become. So I made the decision to remove it from my life. Now, does that mean you have to completely delete every social media account you have? No. If you can use it with moderation, that's great. If you can set boundaries and actually control your usage, that's awesome. But if you know deep down that every time you open these apps, you lose an hour of your day without realizing it, maybe it's worth taking a step back and asking yourself if this is actually adding to your life. And whether you're a teenager, someone in your 20s, or even someone watching this who's 50 years old, I genuinely don't think there are many benefits to scrolling on social medias. The entertainment might feel good in the moment, but the cost is the time, the focus, and the ambition that you're giving away. And that's why I would consider social media one of the first legal drugs that can slowly ruin your life if you're not careful. The second one I want to talk about, though, is alcohol. Now, before I fully talk about this one, I just want to lay out my perspective and where I'm coming from so you get the gist of my background. I'm currently 21 years old. I've been 21 for a while now, and I've never had a sip of alcohol in my life. And I know some people are going to hear that and go, what? That's absolutely crazy. And honestly, if you think that, that's okay. I'm not here to judge you or act like I'm better than anyone else. But for a second, I want to challenge the way we think about drinking. Because let's be honest, drinking at 21 is basically just a social expectation. It's just what everyone does. The day I turned 21, everybody was asking me what my favorite drink was, maybe what my favorite bar was, and that's family and friends asking me that, by the way. And again, that was just all interesting to me because it was just assumed that that was the next step I was going to take in my life. But the question I've always come back to is, why do we drink? Because when I look at alcohol, I see a lot of the downsides. It's expensive. Going out and buying drinks can add up quickly. It'll affect your health, it can lead to addictions, and there are plenty of people who make choices while drinking that they end up later regretting. I understand that. People will say, well, it's fun, and I get that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like people don't have fun drinking. Obviously, people do. But what happens when you wake up the next day hungover, right? I just don't get it. But I think the question is, are there other ways to have fun? Because to me, that's where the argument gets interesting. Again, if the biggest benefit is that it makes a night more enjoyable, but the downside is that it can cost you money, hurt your health, and affect your decisions, and potentially become something you depend on, is it really worth it? Probably not. Now, I'm not going to say every person who drinks is going to ruin their life. That's obviously not true. There are people who drink responsibly and don't have major problems. But I do think it is okay to challenge social norms. Because sometimes we do things simply because everyone else is doing them. And I think about it like this. If everyone else is doing something that wasn't good for you, would you still probably do it? Probably not. not. Kind of like if everybody would jump off a cliff, would you do that too? Probably not. For me personally, I have never understood the appeal of putting something in my body that makes me feel terrible, can leave me feeling terrible the next day as well, costs a lot of money, and could potentially be addictive. But that's just my perspective. But anyways, to bring us to our third legal drug, it is nicotine. Now, this is one that I'm not going to talk about for long because honestly, I don't have a ton of personal experience with it. I've never used it myself, and I haven't really been around people that do either. So I'm not going to act here and act like I'm a nicotine expert, but what I do know is it is very addictive. And anytime you have something in your life that you don't feel like you can stop doing, that's a problem that's starting. And that's the thing that stands out to me about nicotine. When I look at it, I just don't see any positives at all. And honestly, I think there's enough of a reason to just be cautious because of the blatant negatives of the cost once again, but also the form of addiction it can form. Because if something has a lot of potential negatives and very few real benefits, why even start in the first place? And I'll say this from my own perspective as a young guy. Anytime I see someone using a vape or any other nicotine product or a Zyn, I've never really looked at them and thought, wow, that person is really impressive. And I don't say that to judge anyone. There are good people who use nicotine. Using nicotine doesn't define who you are as a person. But if you're someone who's trying to improve yourself, build confidence, become healthier, or even a higher quality relationship, or that's what you're trying to find, I just don't see nicotine helping you get to any of those goals. Because think about it, your future wife, your future kids, and your future self probably aren't going to look back and say, wow, I'm really glad I spent my years depending on nicotine. And your kids are probably going to hate you for it, and your wife is probably going to find you really unattractive, which will lead to other problems. So once again, I'm not here to attack anyone who uses it. I'm just saying that personally, I don't understand why you'd willingly introduce something into your life that has the potential to become addictive, cost money, and really doesn't provide any meaningful long-term benefits. And if you're already wrapped up into something like that, I'd try to get out of it as soon as possible. That's just me once again. Sometimes the easiest way to avoid a problem is to never start in the first place. That's what I believe everyone watching this video should do, not only with alcohol, not only with nicotine, but with any form of drugs or substances like that as a whole. Which brings me to the fourth thing on this list, which might sound a little weird, and honestly, I debated about even putting it on here because I don't want people to think I'm saying video games are just automatically bad, because they're not. I don't think playing video games for a couple hours with your friends is going to ruin your life. I don't think every person who plays video games has a problem, but I do think video games can become dangerous when they start taking over your life. And I think this is especially true with certain types of games, because nowadays there are so many games that literally are designed to keep you coming back. There are games that continue progressing when you're offline, that you need to keep up with and managing your accounts just so you don't fall behind every other players. There are also games where people can raid you when you're offline, and you need to make sure somebody from your team's on. I don't really know how those types of games work. I think Sea of Thieves works like that, and there's a game called Rust a little bit ago that was kind of like that too. I have no idea. I never played them, but those are meant to be addictive and meant to suck time out of your life. I've seen people get so deep into video games that they literally had to sell their console or have a friend hold on to it, but honestly, I respect that because it takes a lot of self-awareness to admit that this is becoming a problem that I need to do something about. And the crazy thing is there are people who are that far into gaming and they don't even realize it. They don't even consider the possibility that can be addictive because they think it's just a video game. But anything that takes control over your time, your money, and your life can become a problem, and that's really what we're talking about here. It's not the hours you're spending playing, it's the money too, because gaming can get expensive. And listen, if you're spending a little bit of money here or there because you enjoy a game, that's your decision. But if you're spending more money on virtual items than you're investing into your actual life, that's a problem worth thinking about. And I say all of this because I have personally been there. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I was always disciplined with my time and money. I spent most of my days in middle school and high school playing 10 to 12 to 14 hours a day playing Madden. There were times where I spent money on Fortnite skins that I'm not proud of. I wish I could get that money back. I've been that guy. So once again, I'm not saying to delete every video game you own and never play again. If you can enjoy games while still taking care of your responsibilities, that's completely fine. But if gaming is becoming the thing you look forward to more than your actual life, if it's replacing your goals, your relationships, or your personal growth, that's when it becomes dangerous, because a video game can give you the feeling of progress without actually moving your real life forward. And that's dangerous because that's the thing that these companies play on to get you sucked in. But anyways, let's move on to the fifth and the final one on this list, which is gambling. And honestly, I think this might be the most dangerous one we're talking about today, because gambling is absolutely exploding among young men right now. And the scary part about gambling is that it doesn't just target one specific interest. It plays into whatever you already enjoy. Do you like sports? You can bet bet on sports. Do you like video games? You can bet on your own video game skills and others. Do you like cards? Obviously, there's always been ways to gamble on cards. Nowadays, you can basically gamble on almost anything, and it's becoming more and more normalized. You can bet on elections, entertainment events, Taylor Swift getting pregnant, random outcomes happening around the world, and things that most people never could imagine you could gamble on. The options are endless, and that's what makes it so dangerous, because it can start out so small. Maybe it's just a $5 bet with your friends, and then it turns into more. Gambling is designed to create you to chase something, and for a lot of people, the small bet turns into something much bigger very fast. I've seen it a lot with the people around me, so I just need you to be careful. And honestly, there's probably someone you know who has gambled on something completely random. I know people that have bet on Korean baseball at 2 a.m. because there's nothing else to bet on because they just want to do something for fun. That's psychotic almost, man. I'm just being honest. It's sickening. And look, I'm going to be honest with you right now. This is something I've personally struggled with too. I wouldn't say gambling has ever ruined my life, but it's definitely negatively affected me. Even if you're gambling a small amount, that money could go towards something else. You could invest it, retirement, save it, try to buy a car with it, anything really. Just buy fast food with it. At least you're going to get something for your money. And then there's the time aspect, because gambling doesn't just take your money, it takes your attention. How many hours do you spend watching games that you don't even care about just because you have money riding on it? How many hours are you spending checking odds, researching bets, or trying to do research through content creators? That time could be spent building a business, improving yourself, studying, developing skills, building relationships, or working towards a better future. And look, I understand why people do it. It's fun. Your friends are probably doing it, and it makes sports more exciting. I get all of that. But something being fun doesn't automatically mean it's good for you. And I think that's something we need to remember. Because once again, gambling can hurt your finances, but it can also hurt your mental health. The constant highs and lows, the stress, the feeling that you need to win your money back, that's a dangerous cycle to get caught in. So if you're someone who could genuinely do it responsibly, that's your decision. But I think everyone should be extremely careful with gambling, because it's one of those things that can start as a harmless hobby and slowly become something that controls your life. And the worst part is, by the time you realize there's a problem, it might already be much deeper than you ever expected. That being said, avoiding these legal drugs is only half the battle. A lot of people don't realize how many small habits are quietly holding them back in their 20s, especially when it comes to money. So if you want to learn how to stop wasting your money and start building a better financial future, click on this video right here, How to Stop Overspending in Your 20s. I'll see you there.